Hello everyone, my name is Satyanarayan and today we are going to take a look at a very important topic for the legal aptitude section of your entrance exams. Today we are going to take a look at the basics of contracts. Now before we continue, please keep in mind that this is not an understanding of the actual application of contracts in real life, but only the basics as far as entrance examinations are concerned. So, what exactly is a contract? Well, taking a seat in a bus amounts to entering into a contract. When you put a coin in the slot of a weighing machine at the railway station or any other place, you have entered into a contract. In fact, when you go to a restaurant and purchase snacks or any other food item, you have entered into a contract. So knowingly or unknowingly, we engage in contracts practically every single day of our life. So it is extremely essential to understand what is the legal definition of a contract and what are its implications. Now, the conventional meaning of contract is limited to business. So in case of people engaged in trade, commerce and industry, they carry on business by entering into contracts. So whenever somebody mentions the word contract, the first word which pops up into our minds is a business deal, a business agreement. So contracts in India are governed by the Indian Contract Act of 1872. As the year itself implies, this would have been created during the British rule. The Britishers have left India, but we see no valid reason as to completely replace the act. Of course, as time has progressed, we have updated the law to include the new changes which have come about. But the essence, the basic facts of the Contract Act remain the same. So what exactly is the Indian Contract Act about? Before we describe what it is, let us see what it does not do. The Indian Contract Act does not lay down so many precise rights and duties which the law will protect and enforce. In fact, it contains rather a number of limiting principles subject to which the parties may create their own rights and duties for themselves, and the law will merely uphold those rights and duties. So, to put it in brief, the Indian Contract Act says, make your own rules, make your own rights and duties as far as this particular deal is concerned. As long as they fall within the guidelines and framework of the Indian Contract Act, we will help you uphold them. So, the Indian Contract Act in some sense is very different from the general law. The parties to a contract in a sense make the law for themselves. As long as they do not transgress, as long as they do not break some legal prohibition, they can frame any rule that they like in regard to the subject matter of the contract. The law will give effect to their contract as far as whatever you have framed falls within the guidelines of the laid down rules in the Act. So what exactly is a contract? Well, if we take a look at the legal definition, Section 2H of the ICA 1872 defines a contract as an agreement enforceable by law. So to understand this definition that a contract is an agreement enforceable by law, let us understand what is an agreement. Well, Section 2E prior to 2H defines agreement as every promise and every set of promises forming consideration for each other. So before we understand the legal definition of the word contract, we first try to understand what is the meaning, what is the legal meaning of agreement. It is a set of promises which form consideration for each other. So now the question arises, what exactly is a promise? Well, Section 2B defines promise in these words. It says, when a person to whom the proposal is made signifies his assent thereto, the proposal is said to be accepted, and a proposal, when accepted, becomes a promise. Now, a lot of legal jargon. Do you feel a bit confused? Well, try to understand. In simple terms, it simply says that one person, let us say A, gives some sort of a proposal, some sort of an offer to the second party, right? So when the second party, let us say B, accepts whatever A proposed, then A has made a promise to B. Now, when A promises something to B, B in return would have agreed to do something or to pay something to A. So this is a set of promises which form some sort of payment for the other. So this is a set of promises which act as consideration, and that is an agreement. And now when this agreement can be enforced by the law, it becomes a contract. So I hope you understand what is meant by a promise. A promise, when accepted, becomes a proposal, and an agreement when enforced by law, is something which is known as a contract. Okay, so the elements of an agreement is, first of all, there has to be an offer or a proposal. Obviously, for someone to agree to what you have said, you have to first propose something to the other person. So the very first required element is an offer. Obviously, the offer or proposal that has to be made has to be accepted. Only when somebody accepts your offer that we get an acceptance and hence an agreement. So what kind of agreements are contracts? Well, only those agreements which are enforceable at law are contracts. So now we need to understand, are all agreements enforceable by law, or is it possible to have an agreement which the law cannot enforce? Well, a contract consists of two elements. One is the agreement and second is the legal obligation. That is, it must be enforceable by law. So let us now try to understand what kind of an agreement is one which is not a contract. Well, here's an example. Assume that there is a person A and he invites B for dinner in a restaurant. Now B accepts this invitation. On the appointed day, B is very happy, dresses up, goes to the restaurant in full expectation of a free meal. And to his or her utter surprise, A is not there. Or another situation, that A is present at the restaurant but refuses to give the free dinner to B. In this case, B unfortunately has no remedy against A. Do you think it's even conceivable that just because A has refused to give a free dinner to B, B will file a suit against A, B will take him to the court and force A to give him that dinner? Seems a bit silly, right? So although there was an agreement between A and B regarding the free dinner, this is not something which can be called a contract in the eyes of law, because if A goes back on his agreement, what can the courts do? I mean, technically speaking, the courts can do a lot of things, but does it make sense to harass the courts for a simple or trivial issue like this? Well, let us say something else happens. A invites B for dinner and A reaches the restaurant with full intention to give that free dinner to B, but B fails to turn up. In this case, again A has no remedy against B. In fact, can A go to a court and file a case against B saying, "My lord, I promised the dinner to B, B did not turn up, I've wasted so much of my time and money and whatnot." Again, a very trivial issue. So obviously these are cases where you will say, yes, there is an agreement, but no, there is no contract as such, right? So let us say A gives a promise to his son to pay him a pocket allowance of rupees 100 every month. And in case A fails or refuses to give his son the promised amount, obviously the son has no remedy against A in the legal sense of the word. Do you think the son is going to drag his father to court, or a court is going to entertain such a case in case the son decides to file a case against his own father for refusing to pay him 100 rupees per month? Right? So again, there is no such contract in place which the law can enforce. So the first example where A promised a free dinner to B is a social agreement. In these examples, the promises are not enforceable at law, as there is no intention in the mind of the parties to create a legal obligation. What do you mean by legal obligation? At the time of making the agreement, neither of the two parties would even think that in case one of the parties breaks the agreement, the other would take him or her to court. So such agreements are known as social agreements, and they do not give rise to legal consequences. So remember this, an agreement is a rather broad term. In fact, it's much broader than a contract. So a contract is an agreement In fact, every contract by default is an agreement, but an agreement is not necessarily a contract. Only that agreement which can be enforced by law, which has all the essential elements as defined by the ICA, is a contract. So what type of obligations are contractual in nature? Well, a legal obligation having its source in an agreement only will give rise to a contract. So obligations that are contractual would be things like, let us say A agrees to sell his motor bicycle to B for rupees 5,000. Now, any person looking at this deal would agree that yes, there is a sort of a business deal going on, right? And it's not just a social commitment. So this type of an agreement does give rise to a legal obligation on the part of A to deliver the motor bicycle to B, and there is a legal obligation on the part of B to pay rupees 5,000 to A. So this kind of an agreement is a contract. In fact, if A does not deliver the motor bicycle, then B can go to a court of law and file a suit against A for non-performance of the promise on the part of A. On the other hand, if A does give the motorcycle but B does not pay the amount of 5,000 to A, then even A can take B to court for the same. But there are certain obligations that are contractual. So just as I mentioned, if A has already given the delivery of the motor bicycle and B refuses to make the payment of the price, then A can go to the court of law and file a suit against B for non-performance of promise. So what kind of agreements are not contractual? Any agreement to do something which is unlawful, immoral or illegal. For example, smuggling or murdering cannot be enforceable by law. So the next time you go to a movie and they come up with the term a contract killer, or you read the term contract killer in a magazine or a newspaper or a book, you should immediately start arguing that this cannot be. You cannot have the term contract killer because killing is an agreement to do an unlawful act. In fact, the killing of any human being is forbidden by the IPC, and because such an agreement cannot be enforced by law, by definition it cannot be a contract. Imagine if A pays X amount of money to B and in return asks him to perform a murder, and if B takes the money but does not kill the person, do you think A has the right to drag B to court and ask the courts to enforce this kind of an agreement? Obviously not. The court would throw both of them into jail, right, for doing or rather planning to do something which is forbidden by the law of the land. So agreement which is to do an unlawful, immoral or illegal act cannot be a contract. Besides, certain agreements have been specifically declared void or unenforceable under the Indian Contract Act. For instance, any agreement to bet, that is a wager, or any agreement in restraint of trade, or an agreement to do an impossible act are all agreements which cannot be termed as contracts because they are expressly forbidden by the law. But more on this later. Now, let's understand a couple of terms. One is a right in personam and second a right in rem. Rights in personam are those rights which are against or in respect of a specific person and not against the world at large. Let us say you have paid some amount of money to a particular person for teaching a subject. Now, in case the person to whom you have paid the money does not teach you the same, can you ask any other unrelated person to perform this activity? No. You enjoy the right to be taught only by that person with whom you have an agreement. So that is a right in persona. It comes about only because an agreement is in place. On the other hand, rights in rem are those which are against the whole world at large. Certain fundamental rights. For example, you have the right to life. You have the right to safety. You have the right to freedom of religion. There is no agreement which you sign with people saying that I have signed an agreement of right to safety with Mr. X, so Mr. X is bound to keep me safe. I have not done such an agreement with Mr. Y, so Mr. Y need not keep me safe. No, nothing like that. So a right in rem is generally a right which you enjoy against the whole world at large. So let us say A is indebted to B for rupees 100. So it is the right of B to recover the amount from A. This right of B against A is known as a right in personam. Now it may be noted that no one else except B has the right to recover the amount from A. And rights in rem, let us say A owns a plot of land, so he has the right to have quiet possession and enjoyment of the same. In other words, every member of the public is under an obligation not to disturb his quiet possession and enjoyment. He need not have an agreement with the public at large saying that I have this right, you better give me. In fact, it is understood that every person is supposed to perform the duty of allowing A to enjoy the rightful use of his land. So such a right enjoyed by A is known as a right in rem. The right of A against the whole world is known as the right in rem. So what are the essential elements of a valid contract? Section 10 of the ICA provides for some more elements which are essential in order to constitute a valid contract, and this section reads as follows. So all agreements are contracts if 1. They are made by the free consent of the parties. 2. They are made by people who are competent to contract. 3. It is for a lawful consideration. 4. It is with a lawful object. And 5th, it is not hereby expressly declared to be void. So whenever you are asked to decide whether an agreement is a contract in the legal sense of the word, you need to check for all these 5 elements. If any one or more of these elements is absent, then such an agreement cannot be called a contract in the sense of the word. So let us start by understanding what is an agreement. An agreement is composed of 2 elements. 1, the offer, and 2, the acceptance. The party making the offer is known as the offerer, and the party to whom the offer is made is known as the offeree. So essentially there must be 2 parties to an agreement. It does not make sense that I make an offer to myself and accept it myself. What sort of an agreement will that be? And more importantly, how do I enforce it in a court of law? So even common sense tells us that there have to be at least 2 parties to an agreement. 1, the party which offers, and 2, the party which accepts. So we need something known as consensus ad idem, which means meeting of the minds. That is, both the parties, that is the offerer and the acceptor, must be thinking of the same thing in the same sense. In other words, there must be consensus ad idem. Let us say A owns 2 cars X and Y which he wishes to sell. In fact, he wishes to sell car X for rupees 30,000. B, an acquaintance of A, does not know that A owns car X also. That means B knows that A has a car Y. He thinks A owns only car Y and is offering to sell the same for the stated price. So B gives his acceptance to buy the same. Let us say B says, okay, I'll buy your car for 30,000 rupees. Now, here there cannot be a contract because the 2 contracting parties have not agreed on the same thing at the same time. A was offering to sell his car X and B was agreeing to buy the car Y. Now, there may be a misunderstanding between the 2 people, but because there is absence of clarity, A did not clarify what he wished to sell, B had no clear idea of what was being sold and thought that he was buying something else. So there is an absence of consensus ad idem, and hence there cannot be a valid contract between these 2 parties. The more important thing to understand is there must be the intention to create a legal relationship, as we have already seen before in case of social agreements, right? So there must be an intention to enter into a legal relationship. An agreement of a purely social or domestic nature is not a contract. Let us take a very famous case called Balfour versus Balfour, in which a husband agreed to pay 30 pounds to his wife every month while he was abroad. Now, as he failed to pay the promised amount, his wife sued him for the recovery of the amount. Now, when this case was presented in front of the learned judges, the verdict was that the wife could not recover as this was a social agreement. Here the parties did not intend to create any legal relationship. In fact, it is based on that domestic relation that the husband agreed to pay the amount to his wife, right? But remember, this does not mean that there cannot be any contract between a husband and wife. It is in this particular case that there is an absence of the intention to create a legal relationship and hence there is no contract. Another case is the Rose and Frank Company versus J.R. Crompton and Brothers Limited of 1925. There was an agreement between the Rose Company and Crompton Company whereof the former were appointed as selling agents in North America for the latter. And one of the clauses included in the agreement was that this arrangement is not a formal or legal agreement and shall not be subject to legal jurisdiction in the law courts. So, when there was a dispute between the two parties and when they went in front of the judges to decide whether there was a contract or not, this agreement was not a legally binding contract as at the time of creating the agreement, the parties intended not to have legal consequences. There's another case which is Jones versus Vernon Spools Limited of 1938. An agreement contained a clause that it shall not give rise to any legal relationships or be legally enforceable, but it will be binding in honor only. Obviously, there was a dispute. The parties went in front of the judges and the verdict in this case was the agreement did not give rise to any legal relation and therefore it was not a contract. A case Parker versus Clark of 1960 where an aged couple, C and his wife, held out a promise by correspondence to their niece and her husband, Mrs. and Mr. P, that C would leave them a portion of his estate in his will if Mrs. and Mr. P would sell their cottage and come to live with the aged couple and to share the household and other expenses. Now, the young couple sold their cottage and started living with the aged couple. But the two couples subsequently quarreled and the aged couple repudiated, that is, went against the agreement by requiring the young couple to stay somewhere else. So, obviously, the young couple filed a suit against the aged couple for this breach of promise. Now, the verdict of the courts was that there was an intention to create a legal relation between the two parties and hence in this case, the young couple could recover the damages. Now, one other important aspect required for a contract to be legal is free and genuine consent. In fact, consent of the parties to the agreement must be free and genuine, and consent of the parties should not be obtained by any one of these things: misrepresentation, fraud, undue influence, coercion, or mistake. If any one of these factors is proven to be present, then the courts will say that the consent is not free and genuine and hence it is not a legally valid and binding contract. More on this later. So if the consent is obtained by any of these flaws, the contract is not valid. A very important aspect is the competence of the parties to contract. The parties to a contract should be competent to enter into the contract. So according to section 11, every person is competent to contract if he, one, is of the age of majority, is of sound mind, and is not disqualified from contracting by any law to which he or she is subject. We will take a look at competence of parties to contract in detail in a later session. So there may be a flaw in the capacity of parties to contract, and if one such flaw is proven, again there is no valid contract in place. The flaw in capacity may be due to reasons like minority, lunacy, idiocy, drunkenness, status, etc. We will take a look at what this means later. Remember, if a party to a contract suffers from any of these flaws, the contract is unenforceable. However, there are a lot of exceptional circumstances defined by the Act. Lawful consideration. the agreement must be supported by consideration on both the sides. Consideration in simple words is the price which is being paid for something which you get. When you sell your cycle to someone and you get some cash in return, your getting the cash is consideration for you, and the person receiving the bicycle gets the consideration in the form of a bicycle in exchange for his money. So each party to the agreement must give or promise something and must receive something or a promise in return. The consideration is the price for which the promise of the other is sought. Remember, this price need not be in terms of money. In case the promise is not supported by consideration, then the promise is considered nudum pactum, which means a bare promise, and such a thing is not enforceable at law. Remember, the consideration must be real and lawful. More on this later. Lawful object means the object or the purpose of the agreement, the essence of the agreement must be something which is lawful and not something which the law disapproves of. So, to summarize the contents that we just saw, we saw the overview of what exactly is a contract. We understood the basic meaning of the Indian Contract Act of 1872, and we just saw the basics of essentials of a contract. We will be taking up each one of these terms in detail in later sessions. Hope you had an enjoyable time getting an introduction to contracts as applicable in examinations. My name is Satyanarayan. You just saw a session on contracts from IQ Ideas. Wish you all the best. Have a good day.